Welcome to the Deep Dive. I'm Nick.
And I'm Pi.
Today is our update Thursday for May 8th, 2025. We're cutting through the noise to bring you the key global updates you need to know.
That's right. It's a packed agenda.
I'll be tackling global economics, some important developments out of China, and a check-in on U.S. news.
And I'll be focusing on that very tense situation unfolding between India and Pakistan, plus the latest insights from what's being called S2 Underground.
Okay, let's dive straight in. The global economic picture. Well, it's dominated by these U.S.-China trade tensions right now.
Absolutely. There's a key meeting happening later today, actually, over in Switzerland.
Right, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Trade Rep Jameson Greer are meeting with Chinese Vice Premier Qi Feng.
The stated goal, at least, is to try and dial back this trade standoff that's been escalating.
And the escalation has been pretty sharp. You've got U.S. tariffs hitting over 145% on Chinese goods.
And China firing back with duties around 125% on American products. I mean, those are huge numbers.
Definitely. And it's rattling global markets. No surprise there. There are real concerns about where both economies are heading.
We've even seen China's growth projections officially downgraded, slipping below that 5% target they had set.
So Beijing's feeling the pressure. They're apparently putting together some kind of financial policy package.
Yeah, reportedly quite a substantial one. The idea is to stabilize their markets and, try to win back some investor confidence.
But interestingly, both Washington and Beijing seem to be downplaying this Switzerland meeting.
They are, framing it more as a side event while they're in Europe for other diplomatic things, almost like a casual chat.
Which, as Lizzie Lee over at the Asia Society Policy Institute suggested, might be a way to keep talking without raising expectations too high.
Exactly. A bit of face-saving, maybe. Keep the lines open without the pressure of needing a big breakthrough right now.
Meanwhile, President Trump's tone is, well, typically defiant. He claimed the tariffs have cut trade cold turkey. Strong words.
But then, almost in the same breath, suggested China wants to make a deal very badly. It's a bit of a mixed message.
China's Ministry of Commerce, though, sounds much more cautious.
Very much so. They acknowledge the back channels are open, but stress that, quote, engagement does not guarantee a deal.
And they're putting the onus back on the U.S., saying Washington needs to correct its mistakes and meet China halfway.
Plus, a warning not to use these talks as a, quote, smokescreen for continued coercion. So, pretty guarded language.
Andy Rothman at Synology called Trump's stance effectively an embargo. Stark assessment.
Yeah, he argued that real talks would need much more political pressure back home in the U.S., pointing to rising prices and potential shortages.
While also acknowledging the pain China's feeling. So these Geneva talks, maybe just a very tentative first step.
Seems that way. A fragile reopening of dialogue, perhaps.
Let's stick with China's economy because it seems that recovery is looking a bit shaky, particularly in early Q2.
It does. Even with the May Day holiday travel surge, the underlying signals for consumer spending and services aren't great.
Right, they had, 314 million domestic trips, up 6.4% year on year. And spending was up too, about 8%, hitting roughly 24.8 billion US dollars.
But the key figure, the per capita spending, that only nudged up 1.5% from last year.
And it's still almost 5% below where it was back in 2019 before the pandemic hit.
Exactly. It shows people are still quite cautious with their wallets, even if they're moving around more.
And that caution shows up elsewhere. The Tain China Services Index fell in April.
Dropped to 50.7 from 51.9 in March. That's barely above the 50 mark that separates growth from contraction. Very close.
And business sentiment seems to have taken a real nosedive.
Yeah, the index for future activity expectations, it's at its second lowest point on record. The only time it was worse was February 2020, right at the start of COVID.
The Taken report directly linked this weakened optimism to the trade war intensifying and slower capital inflows into key sectors like biotech and tech.
And the New Economy Index, tracking those high-tech industries, also dropped significantly in April, hitting its lowest since last October.
Even the film industry, usually a decent indicator, had a really underwhelming May holiday. Revenue was about half of last year's.
It suggests consumers are really shifting their priorities, maybe tightening their belts.
Tourism is still doing relatively okay, likely because of pent-up demand and maybe some government stimulus kicking in.
But that gap between travel numbers and actual spending, it points to that lingering consumer caution we mentioned.
So, yeah, pressure is definitely mounting on Beijing to perhaps deploy more targeted stimulus, try and boost confidence again.
It's a tough balancing act for them, especially with those trade headwinds.
Okay, shifting gears slightly, but still on China, their push in semiconductors.
Yeah.
This seems really significant.
Hugely significant. It's all about reducing reliance on foreign tech, especially chips. The Financial Times had a report on this.
About Huawei spearheading a new manufacturing hub down in Shenzhen.
That's the one. Apparently, Huawei is the main driver behind 3 chip production facilities in the Guan district.
And one site, run directly by Huawei, is reportedly gearing up to make 7-nanometer chips for smartphones and AI.
If true, that's a major milestone. Their first self-made high-performance chips, basically bypassing some of the U.S. export controls. Producing 7-nanometer chips is, well, it's not easy.
And the other 2 facilities nearby, Sakarya and Suisha. Huawei is deeply involved there too, right? Even if they deny it officially.
Reports suggest heavy involvement funding, staffing, tech sharing. It looks like a coordinated network.
And big Chinese players like SMIC and Shanghai Microelectronics are apparently supporting this effort too.
An insider told Reuters that with Huawei's political clout, cooperation is almost expected. It highlights that national push for self-sufficiency.
Meanwhile, on the U.S. side, NVIDIA is scrambling a bit.
They are trying to keep their foothold in that massive Chinese market despite the tightening U.S. export rules.
The information reported NVIDIA plans to get a compliant sample chip out to Chinese customers by June.
And they're working on localized versions of their new Blackwell AI chips, too. They see the market potential there.
CEO Jensen Huang was pretty blunt about it, wasn't he? Said the Chinese AI chip market could hit $50 billion.
Yeah, and that it would be a tremendous loss not to be able to address it as an American company. It really underscores the stakes in this tech race.
Absolutely. Okay, let's pivot from tech and economics to geopolitics. Some interesting comments from the top U.S. military commander in the Pacific.
Admiral Samuel Paparo, head of Indo-Pacific Command, he gave an assessment on a potential Taiwan conflict.
Said the U.S. would win if war broke out today.
Yes, but with a big caveat that the balance is becoming increasingly precarious because of China's rapid military buildup.
He pointed to U.S. strengths, like undersea warfare and space capabilities.
But really flagged China's shipbuilding pace as a major concern. Building subs much faster, many more combat ships per year.
The numbers were stark. 2 Chinese subs for every 1.4 U.S. 1.6 Chinese combat ships a year versus America's 1.8. That adds up over time.
And he noted the PLA exercises around Taiwan have become much bigger and more complex just since he took command, simulating seizures, blockades, assaults.
He used that metaphor, boiling the frog, but called it a rapid boil, normalizing that intense military pressure.
And also highlighted China's growing reach beyond Taiwan, like naval drills near Australia and even circumnavigating Australia for the first time.
They're stretching their legs, he said, becoming a global force bit by bit.
Now, U.S. intelligence believes Xi Jinping told the PLA to be ready to invade Taiwan by 2027. Paparo stressed this is likely a readiness goal, not a hard deadline.
Right. Whether China actually acts depends on their assessment of their own readiness, Taiwan's defenses,
And crucially, the capability, will, and probability of allied assistance, a clear nod to the U.S. role.
And on American willingness to intervene, Paparo seemed pretty clear.
Yeah, he basically said, history shows people often doubt America will fight, but, quote, that's not the track record. A strong statement.
Okay, let's bring it back to the U.S. domestic scene, the Federal Reserve and interest rates.
Fed Chair Jerome Powell basically said on Wednesday they're in no rush to change rates.
Holding steady. The committee voted unanimously to keep the federal funds rate where it's been since December, between 4.25% and 4.5%.
And Powell pointed directly to President Trump's tariff policies as a key reason for caution, saying they're increasing uncertainty.
He laid out the potential impact pretty clearly.
Yeah, he said if these big tariff hikes stick, they're likely to cause higher inflation, slower growth, and more unemployment. That classic stagflation risk.
Which puts the Fed in a tough spot trying to balance price stability and maximum employment. Those goals could start conflicting.
Powell acknowledged the inflation hit from tariffs might be temporary, just a one-off price jump.
But he also didn't rule out more persistent inflation. The Fed's official statement flagged risks on both sides, higher inflation and rising joblessness.
So the message is patience. Powell said, we think we're in the right place to wait and see. We don't feel like we need to be in a hurry. The cost of waiting seems low for now, in their view.
Of course, this whole tariff-heavy America First strategy divides economists. Some fear stagflation.
While others argue the pain is short-term, with longer-term benefits down the road, it's a real debate.
And the economic data itself is, well, messy.
Exactly. The economy actually contracted earlier this year, first time since 2022. But underlying demand looks resilient.
We saw that import surge before the tariffs hit, strong consumer spending in March, Solid job growth in April.
But recession worries linger. Some companies are pausing investments. Though key inflation measures have cooled a bit, it's complicated.
Markets seem to take the Fed news with measured optimism.
Yeah, as Jason Pride at Glenmade put it, the Fed's path depends on whether the stag or the inflation emerges as the bigger risk. Sums it up well.
So Powell's trying to navigate a tricky middle path. And with Trump doubling down on tariffs.
Looks like markets should brace for more volatility. Tariffs seem here to stay, at least for now.
Okay, one last bit of economic news before we move on. The UK and India finalized a trade deal.
That's right, hailed as a benchmark free trade agreement. It cuts tariffs on things like cosmetics, cars, alcohol.
A significant move towards deeper ties, especially against the backdrop of rising global protectionism.
Announced by UK PM Sarama and India's PM Modi. It's the UK's first big post-Brexit deal, really, and India's first with a European economy. Took over 3 years to negotiate.
Though some analysts say the actual economic impact might be quite modest. More symbolic, perhaps.
Essentially. But it aims to boost trade currently worth about $57 billion US.
What are the key parts? Whiskey tariffs halved initially, then dropping further.
Yeah, from 150% down to 75%, then eventually 40% over a decade. UK car tariffs down from 100% to 10% under a quota.
And India gets tariff cuts on 99% of its lines to the UK, plus better access for its services sector.
There's also a bit about avoiding double pension taxes for short-term workers.
The UK government estimates India will cut tariffs worth over £400 million a year initially, rising towards £1 billion later. They project a long-term UK GDP boost of £4.8 billion.
Bloomberg Economics is a bit more cautious, estimating maybe a 0.1% boost, so estimates vary.
But benefits for consumers on both sides. Cheaper UK goods in India. Cheaper Indian goods in the UK.
Seen as a rare win for UK trade policy post-Brexit, and it helps India's pitch as an alternative manufacturing hub to China.
Though there was some controversy in the UK about national insurance exemptions for Indian workers.
Yeah, the opposition criticized it, but the government says it's reciprocal. Standard political back and forth.
And the UK is apparently trying to get a deal with the US, too, to soften the blow from Trump's tariffs on cars and steel.
But as the Financial Times pointed out, the UK doesn't have much leverage there. They buy very little, relatively speaking, from the US. So we'll see how that goes.
Okay, a lot happening on the economic front. Pi, let's shift focus now to the really alarming situation between India and Pakistan. It sounds like things have escalated dramatically.
They really have, Nick. It's extremely concerning. Multiple credible sources are reporting a major escalation. Pakistan apparently launched a large-scale missile and drone attack targeting India.
Specifically in the Kashmir region, near Jammu.
Yes, that's the focus area. Eyewitnesses are describing major explosions, some reportedly very close to the Jammu airport.
And this is said to be retaliation for an Indian attack on Lahore the night before.
Correct. There were reports and visuals, including satellite imagery, showing a large smoke plume over Lahore. The strike was allegedly near the Naval College there, reportedly carried out by an Indian drone.
Pakistan's army even confirmed a strike happened in that vicinity.
Yes, and afterwards, Pakistani fighter jets F-16s, JF-17s, were seen patrolling over Lahore, a clear sign of heightened alert.
There were videos circulating too, allegedly showing Pakistani air defenses in action over the city.
Unverified videos, yes, purportedly showing engagements. Another unconfirmed video even claimed to show a direct drone strike with some very tentative speculation about Israeli components, again, highly unconfirmed.
Understandably, the U.S. consulate in Lahore issued a security alert.
They did. Told staff to shelter in place due to reports of explosions, downed drones, potential airspace violations. There were even some early unverified whispers about possible evacuations near the main airport.
And the Pakistani military claimed they shot down Indian drones.
Their claim was intercepting a dozen Indian drones overnight, one of which supposedly hit a military target near Lahore, causing damage and injuries.
And Pakistani officials were using very strong language.
Extremely strong. The defense minister basically said retaliation was increasingly certain, that there was hardly any space left to de-escalate, and the conflict was heading down a blind alley. Very ominous words.
And now it seems that retaliation has indeed occurred, targeting Jammu in India.
That's what the reports indicate. Pakistani drones attacking the Jammu area. The Indian military is said to be engaging them. Widespread blackouts are being reported there.
People hearing blasts, sirens, Videos emerging, supposedly showing engagements over the city.
Yes, multiple reports of explosions and sirens in Jammu, and some unverified footage claiming to show interceptions over what's termed Indian-occupied Kashmir, likely near Jammu.
CNN News 18 in India is reporting their S-400 air defense systems were activated.
Their report claims the S-400s intercepted multiple Pakistani drones and missiles targeting Jammu, Udhampur, Aknor, and Pathankot. That's a significant claim, if accurate.
And major blackouts are happening across Punjab and other areas in India, too.
The situation in Jammu sounds chaotic. An eyewitness told the BBC they saw about 16 objects falling near the airport from a bridge.
And an AFP security source suggested explosions might have happened at the airport itself.
Local reports paint a picture of panic. Markets shut, people running, sirens, power cuts across the city.
Meanwhile, back in Pakistan, an emergency was declared in Islamabad, while the Jammu attack was supposedly happening.
Yes, though the specific reason wasn't immediately clear. Trading on their stock market was suspended indefinitely. All airports closed, airspace cleared.
Hospitals put on high alert, staff leave canceled, a nation bracing itself.
There were even some unconfirmed reports of sirens in Islamabad itself, though footage seemed to show clear skies, so a lot of tension and conflicting information.
This sudden flare-up has obviously prompted a lot of analysis. Valuetainment connected India's initial strike to that awful militant attack in Kashmir back on April 22nd.
You're right, the one that killed 26 people, and they immediately flagged the nuclear danger, with both countries having around 170 warheads each. That's the biggest fear, obviously.
They discussed potential escalation scenarios, even mentioning China and Russia possibly getting involved.
Yeah, speculating about China's motives, maybe unhappy about manufacturing shifting to India, possibly seeing it as a proxy conflict. They also covered the long, troubled history since 1947, the wars, the attacks.
And India's response after the April 22nd attack was swift and strong. Modi vowing justice, Pakistan denying involvement.
India then accused Pakistan of state-sponsored terror and, critically, put the Indus Water Treaty on hold.
That water treaty move.
Yeah.
Pakistan called it an act of war, a violation of a nuclear red line. That's serious.
Very serious. And followed by border closures, airspace shutdowns, visa cancellations, diplomatic expulsions, trade suspensions, a whole raft of escalatory measures from India.
Valuetainment also went into Pakistan's stated nuclear red lines, things like territorial loss, major military defeat, economic strangulation.
Highlighting the conditions under which Pakistan might consider using nuclear weapons, they noted Iran urging restraint and the UN Security Council discussing de-escalation.
And touched on Russia's ties to India versus China's support for Pakistan, potential U.S. involvement, and the context of Hindu nationalism in India.
Then the military show offered an even starker take, saying tensions had exploded into direct military combat.
Airstrikes, claims of downed jets, calling it the closest they've been to full-blown, potentially nuclear war in decades.
They also traced it back to that April attack on tourists in Pahalgam, blaming terrorists believed to have come from Pakistan.
And noted India waited 2 weeks before striking after Pakistan denied involvement and called for an investigation. Modi's quote about punishing every terrorist and their backers was highlighted.
They detailed India's non-military escalations, visas, advisors, the water treaty, and Pakistan's reciprocal responses, including calling the water treaty suspension an act of war.
Then described India's May 6th precision airstrikes, targeting alleged militant groups inside Pakistan and Kashmir.
While Pakistan claimed those strikes killed 26 civilians, injured 46, and hit a mosque, killing 13, including a child, very different narratives.
And Pakistan's counterclaims, shooting down 5 Indian jets, Rafale, Su-30, MiG-29, and drones. India hasn't confirmed those losses.
Plus, reports of Pakistani shelling along the line of control causing casualties on the Indian side and firefights between troops.
They compared it to the 2019 flare-up, but called this more worrying because the initial trigger involved civilian targets.
And then they got into the nuclear arsenals. India 172, Pakistan 170, similar levels of nuclear threat.
Breaking down the delivery systems. India's air, sea, including subs, and land missiles versus Pakistan's air, less capable sea, and land missiles, mostly shorter range but developing longer ones.
They gave India a slight edge due to submarine launch capability and more powerful missiles, but emphasized mutual destruction is the almost certain outcome of nuclear war.
And they brought up that unnerving 2019 study predicting a nuclear war in 2025, triggered by a Kashmir terror attack.
The study scenario was terrifying. Day one, Pakistan uses tactical nukes on its own soil against Indian tanks. Day 2, more Pakistani tactical nukes. India retaliates with strategic nukes. Day 3, escalating exchanges, hitting military sites, then cities.
The study predicted 125 million immediate deaths, societal collapse, fallout.
And devastating global consequences. Huge amounts of black carbon in the atmosphere, nuclear winter, global famine potentially killing billions. Just catastrophic.
The study thought other nuclear powers probably wouldn't get directly involved due to mutual deterrence.
And they reiterated India's no first-use policy, with caveats, versus Pakistan's lack of one, suggesting Pakistan might use nukes first if facing conventional defeat. A truly grim picture.
Market update focused on the economic fallout, obviously. Alarm in global markets, fears of regional instability.
Pointing out both economies are fragile post-pandemic, Pakistan especially reliant on the IMF. Conflict puts immense strain on Pakistan's economy, reforms derailed, currency weakens, inflation worsens.
And for India, aiming to be a global manufacturing hub, this conflict complicates everything. Regional instability spooks investors. Suspending the water treaty adds environmental and agricultural risks.
Makes it harder for multinationals looking at India as a China alternative.
International response seems cautious. Trump hoping it ends quickly, Rubio monitoring, but limited U.S. leverage beyond mediation.
And the risks of spillover are huge, disrupting trade, impacting Afghanistan, Iran, China's Belt and Road. It fragments the region when cooperation is needed.
And always that nuclear overhang. Even with past restraint, the risk of miscalculation with 160, 170 warheads on each side is immense. Nuclear war means global economic catastrophe.
Talk TV also emphasized the danger, calling it a real-time test of nuclear deterrence with active fighting, unlike the Cuban Missile Crisis.
They noted limited UK influence, China's complex role, claimed by both, historically allied to Pakistan now, disputes with India, risk of China getting drawn in.
And awkward timing for that UK-India trade deal.
They mentioned the U.S.-India relationship under Trump being friendly, making it hard for the U.S. to be seen as an impartial broker now. And Trump's perceived pro-Hindu nationalism stance doesn't help with Pakistan.
Plus, concerns about potential spillover violence in UK cities like Leicester with large South Asian communities.
They described Kashmir as that long simmering sore, with deeply held conflicting views, pessimistic about easy solutions.
And raised the critical issue of water, India controlling rivers to Pakistan, China controlling rivers to India, a potential future flashpoint.
Timcast IRL also focused heavily on that 2019 study predicting nuclear war in 2025.
Going through its day-by-day escalation scenario, again, tactical nukes, strategic exchanges, hitting cities, the global fallout.
They noted the study assumed about 250 weapons each, while current estimates are lower, around 170 each, but still terrifyingly high.
They also touched on differing religious perspectives on war, Hindu reincarnation versus Islamic jihad, and questioned the validity of some circulating videos warning about propaganda.
Highlighting the conflicting claims about the strikes, India targeting terrorists, Pakistan claiming civilian mosque hits, and mentioned those odd happy payday tweets from some Indian accounts.
Okay, so amidst all that alarming analysis, what's the latest from the ground, according to S2 Underground?
Their update from today, May 8th, offers a slightly different perspective. They say, yes, there's sporadic fighting, drone attacks, artillery barrages.
But they characterize it as falling short of what most would consider a war. Constant clashes, yes, but maybe not full-scale conflict yet.
And crucially, they report few, if any, casualties from the shelling so far. The caution figures are hard to verify, but suggest fatalities are extremely low compared to the intensity reported, maybe under 50 total. Mostly civilians.
That's a significant counterpoint to some of the more alarming reports. They also dismiss many social media videos as AI-generated or from other conflicts.
And they noted a potentially de-escalatory move. Reports that India opened sluice gates on at least one dam, resuming some water flow to Pakistan.
S2 interprets that as possibly intended to lessen the severity of Pakistan's counterattack, though they question how significant that counterattack actually was beyond border skirmishes. So a more measured, though still tense, picture from them.
Okay, so let's try to pull this all together. We have ongoing U.S.-China trade friction, with talks planned but expectations low. China's economy showing fragility but also making strides in key tech, like semiconductors.
A U.S. military assessment acknowledging a narrowing gap over Taiwan. The Fed holding rates steady due to tariff uncertainty. A new UK-India trade pact.
But overshadowing much of this is the dramatic military escalation between India and Pakistan strikes, counterstrikes, alarming rhetoric, and the terrifying nuclear dimension being widely discussed.
Although that S2 underground report suggests the immediate ground situation, while tense with ongoing clashes, might not yet match the scale implied by some initial reports or analyses, with potentially lower casualties so far, and maybe even a slight de-escalatory signal on the water issue, still incredibly dangerous.
Absolutely. It shows how interconnected everything is: economics, geopolitics, technology, regional conflicts, and how volatile the global landscape feels right now.
The balance of power seems incredibly delicate, especially in South Asia right now.
It really does. So maybe the final thought for you, our listeners, is this. Looking at the snapshot, the trade wars, the tech races, the military buildups, the flashpoints like India-Pakistan, what do you think are the biggest underlying drivers of this instability we're seeing? And how might they shape the coming months?
Plenty to think about there. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into today's global updates.
If you found this useful, please do like and subscribe to The Deep Dive for more analysis. And if you'd like to support our work, check out the links, including our GoFundMe page, in the show notes.